before mother and father got, or at least either before or just after mother and father got married, because it had so much help from Quakers whilst my father was in prison. In fact, some of the only people who gave much help, they started looking into what Quakers did and who they were. And they joined the Quakers before either my brother or myself were born. So that at that time, if a child was born to a Quaker couple, you became a birthright friend automatically. That no longer happens. A child has to decide for themselves these days whether they wish to be Quakers or not. But anyway, in other words, I was brought up in a Quaker household. And as I say, I went to primary school first. And at the age of 10, I went to a Quaker boarding school in Yorkshire, Ackworth. It's been established since the mid-18th century, and it had a very good reputation. Now, going at 10, I found it pretty hard going. It was a pretty tough school, but nevertheless, it was a very good one. Now, it was founded on the basis of Quaker testimonies. Now, there are 4 Quaker testimonies, which anyone knowing anything about Quakers will have heard of. The first one is simplicity. The second is truth. The third, equality. And the final one, peace, which of course is the one particularly related to my decision, any influence that there may have been. Now, perhaps people don't know too much about Quakers, and I think just I'll just read a section here which may help people to understand who we are. But first of all, the Quaker Peace Testimony. The Peace Testimony is probably the best known of the Quaker testimonies, the ones that I've spoke to you about. Its roots lie in the personal experiences of the love and power of Christ, which marked the founders of the Quaker movement. They recognized the realities of evil and conflict, but it was contrary to the spirit of Christ to use war and violence as means to deal with them. Quakers also have opposed the principle of conscription since its inception in 1916. It imperils the liberty of the individual conscience, which is the main hope of human progress. And it entrenches more deeply that militarism from which we all desire the world to be freed. Now, you've probably heard that George Fox was the founder of the Quakers back in the 1650s. And in 1651, he made a declaration to Charles II. And this was, I told the Commonwealth Commissioners I lived in the virtue of that life and power that took away the occasion of all wars. I told them I was coming to the covenant of peace, which was before wars and strife were. Now, the Peace Testament has been a source of inspiration to friends through the centuries, for it points to a way of life which embraces all human relationships. As a society, we've been faithful throughout in maintaining a corporate witness against all war and violence. The whole 360 odd years, or whatever it is now. However, in our personal lives, we have continued to wrestle with the difficulty of finding ways to reconcile our faith with practical ways of living it out in the world. As friends, we face a bewildering array of social and international challenges which have widened the relevance of the peace testimony from the issue of peace and war between states to the problems of tensions and conflict in all their forms. So that, of course, was one of my great influences, the two being my parents' beliefs and the fact that I was a Quaker, a regular attender as a child, and going to a Quaker school, which kept very fairly to those standards. Now, people might think Quaker ideas are imposed on members, particularly children. That is very, very far from the truth. One of the great things about Quakerism is the complete freedom of thought which one has. As an individual, you're expected to think for yourself, not told what to do. You have to think for yourself, obviously read and study and assess things, read the Bible, learn about Christ's love, message of love and so on. And this was the case at school. Certainly, it was a large school, well, I think 400 or 500 there, boys and girls, not co-educational at the time when I went, it is now, but it was just two completely separate wings in a Georgian building. And I would say that the majority of children there were not Quakers, and from other families who had read about the educational standards which were usually achieved in Quaker schools, several of which exist throughout the country, even to this day. And they sent their children, obviously, to try to achieve the best education. And I think the big thing I found at school was that because of this necessity and the ability to think for yourself, you had an opportunity of thinking through things. I went in 1935, and of course that was a period where a few years later you were seeing that the world wasn't really proceeding too well after the termination of the First World War.